All right, learning target 10. We have graphed exponential functions. Remember, logarithms are inverses of exponential functions, and so we're going to graph logarithmic functions today. All right, so for the first one, you have y equals log base 1/2 of x. So I know you guys can type these things in your calculator, I get that. But on your quizzes, I want you to show some understanding of how logarithms and exponentials work. So the first thing I'm going to want you to do is rewrite it as an exponential function. So in this case, we have 1/2 to the y power equals x. So this is a little bit different than what you're used to, right? Normally you have something where you have an input of an x, but in this case, we don't have y equals, we have x equals. And if I try to solve for y, it's going to get tricky, so we're going to have to leave it this way. And so I'm going to use a table of values to graph this. But instead of having an input of an x value, I'm going to have an input of a y value, and I'll have to get an x value out. But then it'll be important when I graph my points that they're still in x, y order. Okay? So for example, I can pick some y values, doesn't matter what they are, and I can find, let's see here, 1/2 to the negative second power. Well, the negative second power, I need to make that a positive, and what it does, it makes it the reciprocal. So it makes it 2 to the second power, and so I get 4. Same thing when you have negative first power, that makes it 2 to the first. Anything to the 0 power is 1. 1/2 to the first is 1/2. And 1/2 to the second is going to be 1/4. So if we start graphing that, again, you have to be careful. We have 4, -2, and 2, -1. Right? X still has to come first. So 4, -2 is right here. And 2, -1 is right there. And 1, 0. And 1/2, 1. And 1/4, 2. And I'm going to keep, if I keep having positive values, I'm going to have 1/2 to some power. I'm going to keep getting a fraction, right? So my function is going to hug right here where it says x equals 0, but it's never going to cross it. It's not going to equal 0. It's going to keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's important to mention that the domain of this is not going to be all real numbers like you're used to. The domain is all x's greater than 0. There is no value that makes this function true that is negative. And then the range happens to be all real numbers. Okay? So again, it's an inverse of an exponential. Some things are kind of backwards. So no big deal. That makes sense for the first one. Now on the second one, I believe that's what's on your note sheet. We need to rewrite this because I have this 1/2 that is not doing me any good because I need to make this work just log of something. So we're going to use our log properties, and it says that you can take a coefficient and make it an exponent. So I'm going to have y is greater than or equal to log base 4 of x to the 1/2 power. Okay? And so then I need to rewrite it. So I'm going to get 4 to the y power is greater than or equal to x to 1/2. Now you have two options. Okay? So I'm going to do the first option, then go back into the second option. First option is you start from here. Okay? So I'm going to have an input of a y value, but whenever I get that, 4 to that power is going to be equal to, if you will, since we can talk about the equation first, go back to the inequality, but equal to x to the 1/2 power. And then from there, to get x, we would have to square this. Because to undo 1/2, you square that. That gets you x to the first. Again, our end result, we need x to the first. So that's what I'm going to do first. So 4 to the negative second is 1/16. 4 to the negative first is 1/4. 4 to the 0 is 1. 4 to the first is 4, and 4 squared is 16. But then if I square all these values, you get 1/256, 1/16, 1, 16, and 256. So that's method 1. Method 2, you could take this 4 to the y power is greater than or equal to x to 1/2, and you could square it from there. If I square this whole inequality, then I'm going to have 4 to the 2y power is greater than or equal to x. Okay? So if I do that, I would do, like for example, using these values, 2 times -2 is -4. So 4 to the -4th is 1 over 256. 2 times -1 is -2. So 4 to the -2nd is 1 over 16. And so doing this method would eliminate this whole column. So that works too, whichever one you want to do. All right. If we start graphing these, again, remember, x has to go first. So we'd have something really small over here at -2. And then at 1 over 16, you have -1. It's really small. 0 or 1, 0. 16, 1. So this drastically goes out to the side. So in this case, again, we're hugging 0. And we drastically increase to the right there. Okay, so we don't have any funky lines going upward. Now, this is an inequality. It says greater than or equal to, so our solid line is fine. Greater than or equal to means above, but if you aren't sure, you can use a test point. So if you want to use 4, -4 as a test point, you can. And we'll put that into the inequality. 4 times 2 to the -4th is greater than or equal to 4. Okay, so if we do that, I'm sorry, I put this dot at 4, 3, or I didn't even do a dot at 4, -4, I did it at 4, 4. Jeez Louise. Okay, so 4, 4 is right here. We're using 4, 4, not 4, -4. So 2 times 4 and it's greater than or equal to 4. Well, yes, 4 to the 8th power is definitely greater than or equal to 4. So we're going to shade above. Now, here's my caution. We talked about how the domain for this function and several other functions like them, they're going to have this cutoff point, and this one is x greater than 0. So that means that these negatives aren't part of the domain. So when we shade above, I'm only going to shade greater than 0, x greater than 0. I'm not going to shade all this over here, okay, because of the domain. That's one thing you have to watch out for with logarithms. So yes, I do on your quiz. I'm going to ask you to rewrite them as exponentials, and I'll probably ask you to show me some way that you solved it or some way that you got a table, because I don't want you to just graph it in your calculator. I want you to show some understanding of how these work. Okay? If you have questions, please ask me. The homework assignment isn't very long, and so there's some that are equations, some are inequalities, and they're easy to practice with. So that's Learning Target 10.